The topic for today's webinar is dramatic architecture. Now, this particular presentation will cover a few pointers on how dramatic architecture can be produced. And here we will be seeing few case studies or examples. These are just cursory views, and I would rather call it an index. And dramatic architecture is not possible without having a debate or a dialogue or a discussion. So there will be some audience exercises, and there will be audience questions which we will take up at the end of the presentation. So right now, let's start with the presentation on dramatic architecture. The first project that is selected to discuss dramatic architecture is this house. This is an experimental project, Neondorf House. Looking at this project, how many of you feel that, yeah, this is dramatic? Now let's decode, let's start demystifying that what is that is creating dramatic effect in this particular project. First is the walls, the floor lines, the slit window which sits right at the end of the vista, and then the sky. When all these elements come together, it becomes pretty dramatic. Now, this particular project is on a vast expanse of site. The siting of the project is very important. It is further away from the main entrance. The main entrance is at lower level, and there is an axis which takes you towards this particular project. And right inside the courtyard of this built form, there is another axis which cuts across. So that is what creates the juxtaposition of axis and creates a beauty which we can call it dramatic. Now let's decode further into this particular project. So there is the element of wall, which is very nicely explored by the architect in this project. So this particular wall acts as a guiding element, and that guides the vision towards the end. And the levels, the play of levels which have been done in this project, as the person keeps walking upwards, the height of the wall goes on virtually reducing, and the nature around starts to open up. So there is this entrance which is marked. There is this vista which is there. Now, the interesting feature of this particular project is it encloses a light court. The courtyard encloses the entire light, and there is a very interesting feature. There is a small cutout which is there, a square window which is at the top right, and it admits a certain amount of light into this particular space. That's this aura which it creates. So this is the view of the court and the built form which is there. We'll go to the next one. So this is the plans. There is this long axis which takes you to the built form. Then there is a shift of axis which points towards this pool and nature. So this particular zone, you can imagine what would happen as a view to the person who is standing here. It's a complete vista that one gets. And this is how it is visually framed. So this is the court, this is the line of axis, and there is this massing which is done here in the bottom left, through which the cone of vision is captured. So when this happens, the extended floor lines, the extended pool, all come together as a juxtaposition of axis and creates the element of dramatization of the space. Now let us explore how can architecture be dramatic, how we can explore that possibility. So the basic, even if today's presentation we are able to decipher this very simple rule of vision, especially the students who are there in the second year, they must be very clear that when you look at straight, when you are looking straight, your cone of vision is 15 degrees on the upper side. The upper portion is 15 degrees, and the cone of vision towards the ground is 30 degrees. So in the majority of the cases, we see more of the ground than we see the sky. If you keep just this aspect very clear in your mind, you place the human figures in the section, you would exactly know what is the kind of view that you are capturing. We always talk about vistas, we always talk about framed views, but this is this basic logic about understanding what is the cone of vision. So primarily, if I have to tell you, the first rule for dramatic architecture to begin is understanding this cone of vision. Next is the play of fenestrations. So fenestrations or openings in a building play a very important or a pivotal role in how that particular vista is captured. Probably in this particular slide, it is very clear that how this particular space is viewing out. So either it's a very small dramatic opening or a slit window which captures the view outside. In this slide, what I find is the one which is at the bottom right. The opening which is at the bottom right is the most important opening, and many times it is missed out in the project. I hope everybody can see the bottom right opening. And providing these openings brings a particular stakeholder into the design. And that stakeholder is no one else but a toddler. So the toddler also has a right to enjoy the view outside. And many of the projects where window sill levels are fixed at 3 feet or 0.9 meters, we miss out on the participation of this stakeholder called as a toddler or a small kid who wants to view outside, enjoy the rains, enjoy the climate. So these are two architectural examples of how spaces can be framed. One is a very picturesque setting, and you capture the view either in a full panorama or slightly visible skyline, a framed vista where you capture a particular hillock at the end. Yeah, it depends, a lot depends on what kind of site you get to do this. And another one is a very popular project I will be covering up in detail later. Well, dealing with fenestrations, not just location of those fenestrations, the sizes of openings are important, but equally important is to understand how they are treated. There is a very good book, if you can refer. It is by Rob Creer. It is called as Architectural Composition. It's completely filled with all the examples of how different shapes and sizes and location of openings have an impact on the visual frame. If you just go through or explore this particular book by Rob Creer, it's a brilliant composition on how articulation of views can be done or how vistas can be framed. If you go to the website robcreer.com, this particular book, e-copy of this book is available for online reading, so you can definitely make use of it. Next important thing to cover is the human height. You have to understand how different levels and humans respond to various levels. I think it was elaborately decoded by Corbusier when he talked about the modular man. He gave very specific, very stringent dimensions, and wherein he anticipated 1.8 meters as 6 feet as an height of an individual. Maybe in the Indian context, we may have to change the scale, but these ideas, especially like how do humans respond to anything which is at 0.5, 1 meter, 1.5 meter, and 2.5 meter or 2 meter. So this basic understanding of how humans respond to various walls and degree of enclosure that they create is also critical in framing vistas or forming of spaces in dramatic architecture. Next is the impact of levels. Definitely, levels have a deep impact on the kind of spaces that we create. It changes the way the user responds to the spaces, the direct views, the overlooking views, and what kind of a vista they get. So especially when people enjoy looking at other people without being noticed. So these kind of explorations of how overlooking spaces can also enhance are part of creating dramatic architecture. Now, if you go to Jaipur, there are Havelis which have got balconies or jharokas. So these were those kind of spaces where overlooking spaces were created just to enjoy the pattern in the street or the life in the street. Again, creating some kind of a dramatic effect. Now, also important is how we use steps to to uh, cover the level differences. And many times these steps are just provided as a way to reach from one level to another. But there is certain degree of articulation which is possible, and probably not just providing a simple staircase, but how that staircase is treated, how the steps are arranged, also create a lot of drama. There are these two examples. I will add some more. Definitely, you must have seen all these types, but we have to have a deep look at these examples. I think the first one, which is on the extreme left, how it is different in experience to the one which is next to it. And then very commonly, I have seen that many students in second year or first year architecture, or even in higher classes, they just put continuous lines to draw steps. But just try that something like this is done. What is happening to just the next block, where you have some part steps and then it is recessed in the plinth. So it creates that kind of a drama. It creates that kind of a mood. If you study the stepwells in Modera or Patan, you will find how these explorations are very interesting. So there are a lot of ways in which the staircases or steps which are used to mitigate the levels can create a dramatic effect. So these are some of the elements which are very easy to handle, and this can happen in any project. But only thing is that when we are drawing them, when we are visualizing them, we have to be sensitive to how we are treating them. Understanding of degree of enclosure is a very matured subject. Even an umbrella creates a degree of enclosure. Addition of a column in a space creates a degree of enclosure. I've got some reference books which will come at the end. If you can go through them to have a deeper understanding of how enclosures are created. Not necessarily always a four wall is required. Only addition of a column or addition of a overhead plane does the job to create the necessary hierarchy. Uh, uh, this is an audience question. Many of you find this build form very dramatic. Now the question over here is, I don't agree to this. Okay. Now this is the kind of debate that I'm bringing this out on this presentation, and I want to say that I don't agree to this. However dramatic it may appear, this is not the right thing to do. So I want my audience to think about this, why I say that although it is dramatic, it's not the right thing to do. While I will go on to show you examples where they have been used in this particular manner to create dramatic effect, and very successfully. So think about this. We'll come back to this question after the presentation is over. Yeah, this is what I call as a very big decision of design. The most important or the most strategic decision of design is locating the built form on site. Where is the built form located on the site? And the entire pathway or the journey which leads you from the first view of that particular project from a distance towards the building. So there is a sequence of experiences when you go through this journey, starting from the first vista, first point from where you look at this build form, what appears first, and then gradually how that building decides to unfold itself. There is an example in our own city. If you visit Kanchenjunga, you will see that when you are approaching from north towards south, you will find that the building appears to rotate. The Kanchenjunga building appears to be rotating. And if you are coming from south, you will only see one facade. It looks like a two-dimensional cardboard. Whenever you are visiting next, traveling to Haji Ali, definitely make sure that you have a good look at this building of Kanchenjunga, how that site plays an important role. Yeah, there are different contexts and different programs which have definitely different needs. So there are, we need to be very wise. We need to be very wise on what kind of a dramatic architecture we need to create. So it will depend upon the context of the site and also the program. So in architecture, nothing is 100% right and nothing is 100% wrong. Nothing is black, nothing is white. So there is a lot of area of how you interpret things. So both the approaches are there. Either it will be monumental, it will strike itself away from the landscape, or it will stand out, or it would just suddenly merge in the landscape. So these are the two approaches shown in the image which is on top. And the choice of built form that you want to make, either you want the building to open outwards or you want a building which looks completely inwards, Both the choices are unique, but again, the decision of what you need to do with this comes from how that particular context is and what kind of a program is what you are dealing with. Yeah, next thing many students do in design, and sometimes they miss out in design, is the treatment of openings or the main entrance to the building. Now, that's the final destination when you want to reach to the build form. And many times this is the most memorable ones. And there are three ways to do it. Either you keep it flat, you project out, or you recess. There are some masterly works that I want to share with you, which are very interesting to look at in dramatic architecture. Now, these are the examples of how various masters have dealt with creating these alcoves or niches, or creating the camouflage for the main entrances. This is again another example. This is one of the most photographed building in the world. It is amongst one of the most photographed building in the world. This is the Robbie House. And what makes this building very unique is, you must have seen the photographs of this building, or you must have come across sketches of this building. But the best part is the entrance of this building is never seen. Now, the entrance of this particular project is never seen from outside. And the reason is, guess what? The entrance is located at the rear side, and it's a very meek entry to this. And then it presents a very fortress-like frontage. And this is how the entire project is. So maybe at one end, we think about the main entrance to be very profound or large, but there is an example of Robbie House, which hides the main entrance. In fact, it is one of the key features of Ethelwright style, where he would always keep a very subtle entry to the project, very difficult to locate from a photograph, where Ethelwright has planned the entry to the building. This is the Legislative Assembly building by Corbusier. Corbusier is known to make use of sunlight and the texture of concrete in a very effective manner. Now, this is a building of national significance, and you can see the scale at which Corbusier works. Corbusier works on a dramatic architecture which is beyond the human scale. It is always monumental. So this is one such example. I want you to have a look at this sheen or shine which is there in this particular patch. So this particular patch shows a shine over there. Now, how he achieves this in design, how the drama is created. So whenever you will go to Chandigarh, you will always find texture of the concrete shines, and it is very brilliantly covered by sunlight. Then how that sunlight works? The solution lies in the way in which he is constructing this section. So he allows sunlight to just kiss the surface of this concrete and just slip past it, and creating those tint and tones or shades and the dark recess which is required for the main entry. And also he's using the same chamfered angle for permitting light from top through a glass mosaic which he has on the ceiling over a huge volume inside. So these are some of the ways in which dramatization of spaces are explored. So this is the plan of the building, and this is the portion where he adds that drama of the main entry. This is another famous built form you cannot miss out if you are going to Ahmedabad, Mill Owners building. And the facade looks amazing. And what makes this facade beautiful is the way the shadows of the building keep changing throughout the day. It is just this gradual change of shadows which happens throughout the day. And how he is able to achieve this, how this particular building is able to achieve that, the answer lies over here. The manner in which he treats these voids in the building, how he adds those pins, understanding the solar orientation, is what is adding to the drama of this particular facade. Yeah, this is an audience exercise. This is one of my favorite architects and one of my favorite projects, Villa Maria. And if I have to cover this topic in dramatic architecture, then a separate session would be required. So I want the audience to explore this project. Note the name Villa Maria by Alvar Aalto. It has everything that a great planning project of design would require to have. So I'll not go into the depth. This is just to create the inquisitiveness so that the audience explores on their own this particular project. Then we always talk about axis in design. What is your planning axis? How your approach to the built form is. I have a few examples of projects where these axes are used. Uh, at the second year level, probably yes. You can just consider that you have heard about it and you are seeing few examples. Later on, as you will mature further, you will understand how the play of axis works. I'll just show you some examples of built forms. This is the frontal axis approach in which the building appears two-dimensional, straightforward approach to the building. Very rarely done. It is suitable for majestic avenues or where you want to create a pathway which is well defined, um, like these avenues here. So these are the examples where frontal axis is preferred. The next approach is to create dramatic axis is the diagonal axis. The diagonal axis is a very sure shot formula in one and many ways to create dramatization, because the built form appears to slightly move on its own. When you are moving on a diagonal axis, you sometimes feel that the building is moving on its axis. Many times you might have seen that the design models are picked up and they are rotated. They are rotated and viewed. So that is to anticipate what kind of that road movement is going to create the view. The movement on the road, or when a vehicle moves on the road, what vista that particular driver is going to see. This is another example of Philip Johnson's glass house, which is in Connecticut, which is using diagonal axis. There's another project again by Alvar Aalto. He has used a diagonal way through the layout again to create that dramatic effect. This is a very interesting way of making access to a project. Not all projects can afford that and not advisable to all the projects. But there are some exceptional cases where such spiral accesses can also be built. When in the access is towards the building and suddenly just takes a parikrama around the building and then the access happens. So there are examples like this. There is one project done by Corbusier in Ahmedabad with his Hathi Singh's villa, or in which the axis goes around the house, giving a very dramatic view of the whole project. And now this is a project which does not need any introduction. Is a Falling Water, or the Kaufman House, one of the key projects of today's discussion. And there are some interesting facts that I would want to present here today about this project. This project is also one which is on a turnaround spiral axis. But the reason is not just to add drama. The reason is, not many of you would have known till now that what was the kind of site which was given. The project today looks like this, but it is very interesting to know what was the site that Ethelred received from the client and why he made a build form which is like this. Yeah, so this is the bare site. This is the bare site which probably Ethelred received to work on, with an access road on one side and the Bear Run River, which had a fall just at the edge of the site, and there was a huge boulder on site. And then Ethelred comes into the picture and makes use of all of this to create an amazing masterpiece. So this is the footprint of the building that he manages to create. You can imagine a design site which everybody would normally crib. There is no space how to construct, but he builds with cantilever decks over the waterfall, and he manages to create a masterpiece. So what it did with this particular rock or the boulder which is there is he added a hearth. He added a hearth or the fireplace right there, and then made it part of the made it the nerve center of the whole house, with the chimney rising up from there and all the other spaces just jetting out from it. So this is the upper floor, and this is the floor plate which connects all the spaces together. So you can see how the design of spaces have been integrated in this. So this is the facade. This is probably the section you might be seeing for the first time, of the section through the bridge which connects Falling Waters to the rest of the area and the waterfall there. This is the section through the building. Now, one more thing is very important. Students and even architects are reluctant to admit that their buildings are inspired from other projects. Some students are reluctant to read a library book because they feel that that is a copied idea. But in architecture, in Nothing is copied. Everything is borrowed and then developed. So a lot of inspiration which F.L. Wright took came from Japanese architecture, which before building this project, F.L. Wright had spent quite some time in Japan and seeing the architecture around, sketching them and taking notes. So probably this was one of the inspiration which led to the design of Falling Waters. There is one particular project in Japan. There is a tea house, and this tea house is located across the lake, and probably from here it is the other side, the one block which is on the left. This block was viewed, and it almost has similar kind of a condition, that there was a bridge to go across and the driveway which went around the building. Probably this was also one of the sources of inspiration for F.L. Wright to do a building like this. Yeah, there is another example which was already in place. It was the Schroeder House. Schroeder House is another very strong example of Bauhaus architecture, which made use of planes and interlocking planes, and that also probably could have been the source of inspiration for interlocking blocks, which F.L. Wright has used very effectively in the project of Falling Waters. Next building, it's more about how the axis works. This is Ronchamp. This Ronchamp has one very precarious condition. The access was from one of the side. It was on a steep slope that people had to access this site. So this is the site condition. It was a top location, and to access that, he chose the top location with a main axis. Then he made a cross, and to further navigate, he planned the routes, how people would move about it, and then he created a wall. The outcome of that is the access decided the profile of the build form. And no doubt, over the period of time, this became the most photographed building. And the reason is the way in which Corbusier explored the site and chose the build form to showcase the shades and shadows of the building and create a frontage. So this is how it stands today. And this is another axis which he added. This pointing of the wall plane. This particular wall plane points out. That is the first thing to be seen, and then gradually the curved wall opens up. This is the amazing conceptualization of dramatization of space. So you can see that the very strong cross lines in the plan which were drawn first, the approach, the curved wall, and then the pointing of the end wall towards the main route of access. Everything was contextual, site-centric, and no doubt about it that this particular project has also becomes later on as the most photographed building and best known for this particular angle, which is anticipated by Corbusier. Yeah, there are a lot of finer details of this project about how the lighting is done, but probably that could ask for another session, which will be in detail about how the lighting is achieved. I can just show you a glimpse of what he achieves inside. This is a mind-blowing example of how he is able to achieve that. This is the plan. Yeah, the idea is the students, once you get introduced to these buildings, you must explore them. You should start reading about it. So this is the most beautiful project, Farnsworth House. Again, a very dramatic building, and it enjoys a very special site. It was in a vast expanse of land, and May van der Weyck chose a very strategic location to place the building. He chose a long walk, again a spiral entry, and from a distance the building shows up. Gradually you can see how that facade is developed. Imagine at that time when this was built, the most popular way to do it was a load bearing construction, and believe me, there was originally a plan to do it like this. So have a plinth which is outside, a very elaborate plinth and load bearing walls, and to be constructed like this. Luckily it was not executed like this, and instead of this it was done in a very majestic way with the use of steel chromium columns and horizontal planes of slabs and decks. This building is very outstanding project, and it is very dramatic. Yeah, the kind of views that it offers to the persons who are occupying the space, and specifically the color white was chosen. Now this is a building which does nothing, which just sits on the site, calmly, and everything else is done by the nature around. The meaning of this sentence will be clear when we go further. Yeah, this is a project where the building just sits silently and then allows the nature, or lets the nature to do everything around it. There are a lot of photographs that you can check online on how this building appears in different seasons. There is also an element of the floor which captures the shadows of the nature, and also nature writes on the floor. And that is an ever changing. Throughout the day, the building changes its color, light, landscape keeps changing, and one just cannot miss out. So was about Farnsworth House. The thing is, we come to the end of the presentation, and after the presentation gets over, the question will be, how do we go about it now? So don't just sit on the chair thinking. I'll just give you some books. Whenever you get time, make sure that you go through Corbusier's book, Analysis of Form. And there is a must read by Simon Unwin, which is 25 Buildings Every Architect Should Understand. If you have not read as now, and make sure that you read it. A lot of examples are given which are other than the ones which are covered here. Definitely go through this. Form, space, and order. Many of us feel that we have seen it, but you have not seen enough. There is a difference in seeing and grasping. So I'll tell you a very simple technique of how to go about a thick book. Randomly open any page and commit yourself for only 3 to 4 pages a day. I think that's the most interesting way to read a book. Never read, at least I do that. I never read a book from 1 to 300 totally. I would just give myself time to read, the choice to read by randomly selecting a page and then going for 3 to 4 pages or 8 to 10 pages at a time, but grasping whatever is given in depth. That is very important. So you don't read it, you absorb the book. So if you want to do that, Form, Space, and Order has a lot to offer. There is a very good book on building structures illustrated. If you start reading it now, you will never go wrong with the structural design. Yeah, this is the book I mentioned earlier, Rob Creer's book on architectural composition. Very interesting book that you all can read. Yeah, there's this one more book which one must definitely go through. It gives you tips on how an architecture student must think, work, and what is architecture about. So you can go through this book. And finally, if I have to conclude, dramatic architecture is a well-informed process. So you have a site, you have to do an analysis, you have a program, you have to mix that program with the site analysis, and then finally you have to come out with a design outcome. So if you ask me in one sentence, what is dramatic architecture? So dramatic architecture, basically it's a well-informed process to design, and with the sole objective of making everyone happy. So definitely the client's emotional component and his expectation of the projects take the center stage. So I would like to end the presentation by saying, keep evolving and merging or churning out ideas. And there is no right time to do it than to do it now.